You can tell here that there's snow on the tent. It feels heavy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Notiers Frontiers Diaries.
So in the last episode, there was tons of flooding. It rained and rained and rained. Everything was flooded. Yellowstone National Park shut down. The road we had just taken in was taken out by the rains and by the flooding of the rivers. It was crazy. I just woke up, as you can see. It was an interesting night. It's pretty windy right now, but it rained all night, like an intense amount of rain, and this is what I woke up to. It could be worse. At least we're not in a lake. There are a lot of places around here that are just completely flooded, and at least it's just mud. You can see the wind is pretty intense right now. It's also raining a little bit, but yeah, it's a lot of rain. I'm gonna...
Hey! It's a muddy, slashy mud pit.
I'm gonna try to get dressed in clothing that is waterproof and go out into the world. It does exist. Look at this. Crazy news is they have closed Yellowstone. That's right. They closed it because I guess the gates were flooding, which I'm not surprised to hear. Now, even after all of that rain, the weather forecast was for something different. So I'm gonna check out our campsite again. Tim says he's made some adjustments to the tarp on the top because even though the rain has stopped for now, it's supposed to start up again, and then it's supposed to snow quite a bit tonight. They say as much as 3 to 5 inches. So yeah, we just want to make sure that our tent setup is good and that it doesn't collapse on us. It's also supposed to be quite windy, as you can see even now. It's very windy.
I said, man, will this rain just please end? And then, you know, the powers that be were like, all right, I'm going to do this no-tier kid of solid. Just gonna stop the rain, but kapow! And then, you know,
Snowstorm!
Snowstorm! Snowstorm!
God. I said snowstorm.
I said snowstorm.
So here are the sites around our campsite. And just by luck, we weren't in that. Because here's our site, and it is much drier for just luck. Not bad. So Tim has reinforced our tent here with extra paracord. Since last night, most of the rain and wind was coming from this direction. He really wanted to make sure that if the snow were to come from this direction, that this side of the tent is super sturdy. So now our tent is not a 4-season tent. It's a 3-season tent. So good for spring, summer, fall, but not for winter.
We kind of made a decision on that because anything winter worthy is not acceptable in summer heat.
Yes.
You just roast in there. So we went with the 3-season, avoiding winter, under the assumption that we can bundle up, maybe throw another tarp on top, and try to trap the heat a little bit better.
I'm super thankful about the tarp. Because that tarp not only kept us really dry, but it was really good for keeping us warm. It was really warm last night. In fact, I got hot. I had to take off my my outer jacket. You did an excellent job. You took our emergency, they're called survival blankets, right? Emergency survival blanket tarps. And you put one underneath our sleeping pads.
Yep.
And you put one...
There's reflection. So one side of it is, the aluminum foil looking reflection. And I put that facing up to, bounce our radiator body heat up. And then I put one on top of the tent with it face down. Not so much in the hopes that it would, microwave the heat back down, but to weatherproof the tent better. Because
exactly.
On our tent where we put the vestibule, there's a failure point that kind of drips.
Our tent has the occasion to leak every once in a while, especially during a powerful storm like what we just had. The tarps served a dual purpose, not just to reflect our heat, but also to weatherproof both the top and the bottom, because everything had turned into mud.
It was like a Slayer concert, like a Pantera little mosh pit underneath our vestibule. It was just,
it was really
earthworms
gross.
were just like, blah, 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 blah. It was so gross.
It may be drying out quite a bit outside of the tent, but inside the tent, it's still very muddy. Ugh. Gross. It was really gross.
And we're in our rain gear, and trying to get our rain gear off before we get into the tent is like this, voodoo magic dance of trying not to get the inside of the tent disgusting.
But we were able to get into the tent nice and dry. We stayed warm that night.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's snowing. Well, it's sleet snowing. I'm excited about it now, but in a few hours I might not be so excited. Let's see if we can stay warm tonight. Hopefully. And the forecast was that it was supposed to snow all night and into the morning. We woke up and I was kind of excited to see what was happening outside of the tent. Good morning. Tim has left the tent and he has reported that there is snow outside, which is really cool. I slept pretty warmly. I didn't even realize it was that cold. I have a really nice setup for sleeping. I slept in this, my down jacket, with my hat, all my thermal wear. But I think the only problem was our sleeping pads kind of separate in the middle. So you can see there's like a gap in between, and we like to cuddle, and that's kind of how we keep our heat underneath our quilt. But Tim slept in the crack the whole night, and I think he was a little bit colder than me, but I was very warm and we survived. Another thing we did last night was we had to sleep with our water filter in our pockets because it can't freeze. If it freezes, it ruins the filter. So Tim slept with it in his pocket, and then since today is going to be freezing and snowing all day, I'm just gonna carry it around with me in my pocket. It's a little inconvenient, but I don't want to risk ruining our filter and then drink some water that is not purified properly. So do what you have to do. I'm very thankful for our down quilt. I absolutely love it. And I'm excited to go out there and see what the snowy world looks like. We survived, yes. It's snowing!
Beginning to look a lot like Christmas for sure.
Yes, it is.
I woke up before her and I unzipped my door and then I unzipped my little, the little rain fly part of it. And there was snow. I could see snow underneath. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is cool. There's going to be snow. Merry Christmas, rah, rah.
Yeah.
In fact, they were playing Christmas music over by the coffee shop.
I know, it was so cool.
But I get out, and it was like only snow, a little bit of snow on top of the tent. But then, like, the snow that I saw inside the tent was like the only snow around. It was...
Yeah, snow did collect on the tent. I think the thing was that the ground was a bit too warm. So the ground was melting the snow, but anything
wet.
that was above the ground was freezing. So snow collected on top of the tent, snow collected on top of the motorcycle, which looked pretty cool. I don't think I'd ever actually seen our motorcycle covered in snow like that.
Yeah, because we often cover it, with the tarp that we were now utilizing as a secondary rain fly. Our sheepskin, we have been having to babysit to not get wet because it stunk from the rains from the last 3 days.
Yeah.
And, to keep it dry, we put it in our little vestibule, and then our whole tent kind of smelled like wet dog. And it was like,
yeah,
I don't know how big of a fan I am of this new sheepskin.
Aww.
But it's hanging right over there.
Yeah.
There she is, not on the bike.
We're still indecisive about the golden fleece.
I'm not indecisive.
I'm indecisive.
She is.
But it was really cool to wake up that morning and see snow just fluttering through the air and piling up on the picnic table, on the motorcycle, and on the tent. It was nice. It was cool.
It was not rain.
It was not rain.
It was amazing.
That's right. So Yellowstone National Park was closed, and that's because the roads had been washed out by all the flooding and everything. And we were in West Yellowstone, which is just west of Yellowstone, and didn't really know what to do since the park was closed and it was snowing. So motorcycling around wasn't probably going to be on our day's agenda. But we had the fortune of two really good friends who we had met in South America coming into West Yellowstone.
It's crazy.
Today we have a very cool thing happening. We're going to be meeting up with our friends Nathan and Deanna from South America. Well, they're from California, but we met them in South America. So cool to meet up with them again.
So Nathan and Deanna we met in, I believe, Bolivia.
I think so.
Yeah, and they were on an old BMW Airhead, same bike that they
So
were
cool.
traveling around Idaho on at the same time we were in West Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And sadly, it took a poop on them. But
I know.
It's
I mean,
like-
it is an old motorcycle.
it's like a 1982. It's like as old as
Yeah,
I am,
it's-
which is old as dirt. It's and I'm an Airhead too, most would say. But that's proof right there, right there. So they had rented a car to come hang out with us.
Yeah.
And go through Yellowstone on the car, and within the time period that they'd rented the car, Yellowstone had closed, and so like their bike pooped on them, Yellowstone closed, and they're like, the only thing we have to do within 100 miles is to go visit the Notiers. And I was like, I'm glad.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, buddy, but we're it.
But you know what? We totally made the best of it. It turns out that West Yellowstone and that whole region around there is full of cool things to see.
Yeah.
It's not just Yellowstone. That's not the only thing to see
It's
out
the
there.
main attraction for sure.
It is. And some of these other things get kind of sidelined normally. But since this was our snow day,
Yep.
we decided, let's check out all the things that are in this region that are really cool. The first thing we went to was the Bear and Wolf Sanctuary.
Huge fan of zoos, and especially when like it's a zoo right outside of a natural environment for where
Right.
you can see the same creatures. But these were rescued wolves and grizzly bears that had been either injured or there was no way for them to live on their own. It wasn't the Tiger King, right? This was, an actual sanctuary.
It was. These animals could no longer live in the wild. And each one, they have the name and a little biography of each animal, and you get to really delve into their history and then see the animal there.
And there were wolves.
Yeah.
And I have never seen a wolf before, and oh my God, are they cool. I mean, this was like some straight out of Game of Thrones dire wolf. It was
Yep.
just these giant beasts of awesomeness.
So cool, like out of my dreams. It was amazing to see those wolves. They are so majestic, just how they walk. You think, all right, all dogs come from wolves originally. They are not like dogs at all. Dogs are super hyper and they're just kind of like all over the place. But the wolves, it's like every step they take is very well thought out.
Yes.
They're almost like the majestic elk of the canines.
This is true.
Does that make sense?
It doesn't, but we all meant what you said. Looking at like this awesome creature that is a wolf, and then knowing that there's these little chihuahuas and smug nose. It's like, why did we we took something so perfect, and then we made a flat-snouted, bug-eyed, drooling thing, and we're like, yes.
It depends on what you think perfect is. They're so beautiful. Wow. The bears were really awesome because we had seen one grizzly in Yellowstone, but it was from very, very far away.
And now
it was so cool because it started to snow again, and there were all these snowflakes just drifting through the air, and there were all these ravens because they had been feeding the bears.
There's so many ravens. Yeah.
They're just kind of bones and picking on the carcasses, and it just looked like this crazy hunting scene out in the wild, even though it was within the confines of this sanctuary.
Yeah. It's always nice to be able to observe a creature fairly close, but at a respectable distance where you and the bear are both safe.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the important part. It turned out to be quite a surprise. I
Yeah.
really was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did.
Yeah.
Then, after the wolf and bear sanctuary, Nathan had heard about these waterfalls that were nearby. They're called Mesa Falls. And he said, oh, you want to go see these waterfalls? We're like, yeah, sure. So we all jumped into the car and went off towards Mesa Falls. I did not think they were going to be nearly this big and impressive.
Yeah.
The falls were huge, and it could have something to do with all the flooding that was going on.
This is very true, yes.
But I think even in the low season, there's some pretty big waterfalls.
That's what I do.
It's hailing.
I mean, the bears and the wolves were awesome, and the waterfalls were really cool. But like, just spending time with
Yeah.
fellow travelers that we had met on a different continent, it was just
Yeah.
a really cool, warm, fuzzy feeling all throughout the day. And we
It
could have
was.
just been going downtown West Yellowstone, and it would have still been fantastic just hanging out with them. But to be able to put ourselves in some pretty cool environments was definitely the cherry on top.
And then Nathan had a friend who said, hey, if you go down this one road,
Yeah.
you can feed the trout in the river.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that sounds bizarre, but I'm down for that.
We had some old stale tortillas. The guy was like, hey, you can feed them bread. Go, just make sure you go get bread. And we're like, tortillas, baby,
It'll work. We get to a spot where we think, okay, this has got to be it. Here's the
Yeah,
river.
we're on like a wild goose chase to find whatever this river is.
Yeah, it's called the Warm River.
Yeah,
it's
and
not
it's very
warm.
cold.
Yeah, but maybe there's a section with some geothermal stuff. I don't know why it's called the Warm River. But we started breaking off little pieces of the tortillas and throwing it in and throwing it in. I didn't see a single fish anywhere.
And you can see the bottom is really, really clear. And I'm like, we're throwing stuff in fully aware that there's no fish around. But again, we're just having a good time with our buddies. And so we're sitting there like idiots, just tossing tortillas in, talking about times past and what we've been up to since. So we get back in the car after half an hour of just tossing half of the tortillas in the water and watching them float down.
We continued down the road because it made a big loop. And
and right
not
where we
even
had
like
turned
50
left,
feet away.
like if we had turned right, like
there's a sign.
yeah,
It's
like
trout
in
feeding.
honor of these two cool people that built this thing, feed fish here, and it's awesome, and we're like,
Yeah.
there it is, and there were only ducks there, but so we're feeding the ducks, and then after a while,
There were trout.
there were trout, like they would kind of fight over them, or like they'd be like these two, it was like,
Yeah, it almost looked like out of a horror movie
was-
when,
yeah.
the kraken starts, all its
For
arms
sure.
start wrestling with itself. It was like that. They were fighting over the tortillas. Yeah, nice one.
And then like a German couple pulled up, and they didn't have anything but sauce, and we're giggling, and so we gave them some tortillas.
Like
They
tortillas.
were like 60, and they were just like us, it was like, we're not, 7 years old, but like, that's what it was like. Every time one would get it, it was like, ooh, did you see that? Whoa, is that a jump? That was two jumpers, folks.
So it was a very fitting end
Yeah.
to our incredible snow day.
We got to see really good friends.
Yes. We said our sad goodbyes to Nathan and Deanna. But the next day, we would be having a proper tour day with Temple of Moto. So we were really excited about that.
To
so
get back on
stay
the
tuned.
motorcycle.
Yes,
Yeah.
and ride with some fellow motorcyclists.
So stay tuned for the next episode when we get back on the road again on two wheels.
I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give us a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below.
Ding, ding.
And we'll be seeing you next time.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Snowstorm.
Oh, good job.
Nailed it. 3, 2, 1. Snowstorm.
didn't know what we're doing.
Let's count down. 3, 2, 1.
Snowstorm.
No.